It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. Green, gardening, and environment radio, flavored with a dash of humor. Welcome to intelligent, irreverent talk about plants and the planet they grow on. Your questions, comments, and participation are always welcome on Facebook and Instagram at The Mike Nowak Show and at Mike Now on Twitter.
Good planets are hard to find. Temperate zones and tropic climes. And true currents and thriving seas. Wind blowing through breathing trees. Strong ozone and safe sunshine. Well, good planets are hard to find. Good planets are in demand.
Brought to you by Bartlett Tree Experts. Every tree needs a champion. Go to bartlett.com.
Jet streams, perfect air.
And here they are, Peggy Malecki and Mike Nowak.
Well, good planets are in demand. Right.
And that cat, that cat is right below me for some reason. Usually she gets La Gata. Usually she gets the heck out of here. She doesn't like it when I do the
Can't
show.
blame her.
No, it's like he's just like too excitable there. What's that all about? I need to somebody who's calm. So, but she's sleeping. I need a La Gata cam here so that I can get her on the show. But there wouldn't be much to show. It would just be so. Oh well. Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the program. And we have identified. I hate starting with technical difficulties, but you know what? We're not going to have any today because we fixed last week and we found out who the culprit was. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Wait, let's get the dinger out because it was not operator error, so it was not me. Okay, that's really all I care about. And I know, and it was not vMix, this lovely little system that we have here. It was not Restream. We thought it might be Restream. Ladies and germs, it was your old buddy Comcast. Yay! All right. And as we all know, everybody loves Comcast. So after the show, I spent at least 45 minutes. Now, I was trying to get out to the burbs because a friend was having a going-away party. And so, nope, I'm on the horn with Comcast and trying to get this whole thing straightened out. And then they finally sent a text, well, it looks like we've cleared up the problem that you had. I'm going, oh, really? So it was and I took a screenshot of that text because when I call them and say, oh, don't you think you owe me a little money because I've got sponsors and stuff on this show, and they'll never do that. But I do have the screenshot that.
Well, they could if you say it's a business thing, but you'll get like $1.09 back. For
Exactly. And I'm like, that's not worth it. Okay, let's just move on here. Just fix the problem, and here we go. And today, and it's so good it's fixed because we've got a great program. It's Tomatomania III. The pending, no, wait, okay, I wish I could remember my own title, the Looming Drought.
The Looming Drought.
And part of the reason I use that title is because I knew it would be good for SEO, and yep, it was. I got a good SEO score on that one. So even though
you get your ding for a Saturday. There's your Saturday ding.
We, you know what I haven't done yet? Let me give me frog. I have my frog. Wait, can you see? You got to tilt it. There we are. My friend Mac gave me that. It sounds more like crickets to me, but it's pretty close to.
It's crickets.
It's a cricket.
Well,
frog.
It could be a frog.
So there we go. And so we're very excited to talk tomatoes, and we hope everybody watching out there. I haven't even looked at the comments. Yep, we've got good morning from hot, dry Portland, Oregon. So yes, this is for you, Ernest, as well. Dan Costa's watching. Shelley's there. Skeet my buddy Skeet here from Bartlett Tree Experts, because every tree needs a champion. Go to bartlett.com.
Bruce is waving out there.
And then they're all jumping on board right now. So I hope you all have tomato questions, because that's what we're going to deal with. And then around 10 o'clock, Peggy and I are going to talk about what we learned this week. And I learned some very interesting things about rain barrels this week. I learned last week about downspouts and gutters. I learned about rain barrels this week. So you're going to hear that story, which is it's actually connected, no pun intended, to the downspout. Yeah, I should wait a second. I think have I got that? There we go. That's always available. So why don't
the screaming marmot before you know it? So
the screaming marmot will be here. So let's go to our guests right now, and there they are. And I do believe that even Keith Mueller is good to go. You're with us, aren't you, Keith?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. I can. You guys have no idea. I know.
Thank you, Comcast.
You have no idea what was going on behind the scenes up until about 8:58 here. So thank you for doing whatever the heck you did, Keith. That guy, Keith Mueller, on the right is also known as KC Tomato. And when he's not on the show, he's making comments about the show and putting up goofy pictures of me interviewing chickens. And Bob Benison says, if we get the forecast rain later today, you can take credit because you talked about the dry weather, kind of like a rain dance. Yes, that's the way we work here. It's you complain about a drought and then it ends.
That's local food forum, Bob.
Yes. I wish the people in California could do that, and the people in Arizona and Utah. Keith, you live in he's KC Tomato because he lives in Kansas City, Mo. And actually, Keith is from Hannibal, Mo, and he had no idea. Peggy, have you heard of Shoeless Joe from Hannibal, Mo? No.
Shoeless Joe the baseball?
Yeah, but it's a song. See, nobody. Okay, come on,
Mike. Come on, let's hear a.
I can't sing it. I just know they go Shoeless Joe from Hannibal, Mo, and that's the only part of it I know. So
he can sing it. See that?
Yeah. There you go.
All right, there's our Instagram reel from this big show.
Yeah. So that's no, not the feet, no. But Keith is a tomato grower and breeder, and we've grown his varieties. I don't have any of your varieties this year, I have to admit, Keith, and I miss that. And Bruce is asking, what movie is that from? I think it's Damn Yankees, but I'm not sure. Okay, getting back to Shoeless Joe.
I'm sure somebody out there knows.
But this is the way we do our show, and most radio and TV people are appalled because I do all this digression at the beginning, and all they, their producers are yelling at them in their ears saying, "Get to the subject, get to the subject." So that's why we'll also say hi to Craig LeHoullier, who's also known as NC Tomato Man. So we got KC Tomato and NC Tomato Man. And that's because you're in North Carolina and you are the author. Wait, and I've got it right here. We've got there we go, Epic Tomato.
Stereo Epic Tomatoes. Oh, I love it.
And I was noticing yesterday that this is one of the all-time great covers. You must be very proud of that cover. It doesn't look like any other gardening book.
And I had absolutely nothing to do with it.
I sent in on the shelf even. From the shelf even.
And the cover tomato is a variety called Green Giant.
Ah, okay. And it's a fantastic tomato book. I got to clear my throat.
Green Giant, which in your blog, I'm sure you'll talk about, you were experimenting with Green Giant and another variety this year. So I'm sure we'll get to that.
Doing all kind. I'm the mad scientist in my laboratory this summer. It's not. Today's summer, right? First day of summer.
Yes, it is.
I believe. Is it today or tomorrow?
Yeah.
It
It's
is
10:32 tonight. 10:32 tonight is solstice.
Okay.
Father's Day, my mother's birthday, my mom and dad's anniversary, and first day of summer. And
Wow.
and we're here. This is a big day.
Yeah.
Woohoo!
And Kina Lulu Mack writes in from L.A. She watches us in L.A. So you're dealing with drought issues there, and we will talk about those today. She says, "Good morning. Please click on the lick button." What is that? Okay,
I think that's the like button.
I think so, but I'm not licking anything on this control board. Okay. Oh, maybe it is for Epic Tomatoes. I don't know. But welcome, you guys. Craig is also the author of a book about straw bale gardening, which you practice, and we will see photos of that. And the name of that book, Craig, is
Growing Vegetables in Straw Bales.
All right. So we've got it all covered today. Yes.
And when is the third book coming out? It was supposed to be out last year.
Oh God, it's, as they say in Amadeus, it's up in my noggin here. It's in my noodle. I can't stop gardening long enough to actually sit at the laptop and write the bloody thing, but it will be out eventually.
We believe you, and then when it is, you will be on the show as soon as we got a spare weekend. But you guys, Keith and Craig know each other. They're good friends. How is it that you guys happen to know each other?
Go ahead, Keith.
I met Craig when I was in North Carolina, and he lived just down the street from my wife's grandparents. A professor took me to his house to show me the tomatoes he had, and that's when. So a lot of my work actually stems from stuff that Craig gave me. And even the stuff I've done with Randy Gardner there in North Carolina chases back to that. And so that was like 94, I think.
Yeah, it was a wet day. I think it was a tropical storm, and we kind of geeked out in the garden looking at flower structures and leaf structures and having a conversation that most people would have said, "What are you guys talking about? What is interesting about this flower?" We found some stuff that was interesting.
And who is Randy Gardner, Keith?
He's a tomato breeder in North Carolina. He's retired now, but a lot of the varieties that were grown on the East Coast developed from what Randy did. All the Mountain series, Mountain Pride, Mountain Fresh, and he is very instrumental in the development of late blight resistant cultivars, which is very important on the East Coast. So a lot of material that is going around from the seed companies, particularly on the East Coast, stems from work that Randy's done. He started there in the 70s, I believe, and retired recently. But he's still doing breeding work, and we're still doing cooperative breeding together.
Okay.
And interestingly, he lives about 5 miles from me, and we've not met yet, but I essentially moved into his backyard. So there's so many interesting synchronicities about Keith and I and who we know and what we do. It's really cool.
Well, you were smiling when Keith mentioned Randy Gardner. Is that because he is so famous?
He's just really great at what he does. He's doing important work, and Keith gave me his contact info, and I hope to be dropping in, setting up a time, and finally getting to meet him after us being aware of what each other have been doing for decades now. We've never met.
All right. Very quickly before we get going, then we'll mention this at the end. You're teaching a tomato growing course with Joe Lample, who is also known as Joe Gardner. Give us, and I put the link on my blog. Folks, you can go to MikeNowak.net, MikeNowak.net, and there's a link there to get you into the class. Tell me about that class.
It's a lot of fun. We actually have 600 students in it right now.
Wow.
It's, it's self led. So there are 10 modules of about 10 lessons each that are in the Teachable platform. And we hold hour-and-a-half live Q&As over Zoom with the students every week, an active Facebook group. It's just a great way to not only teach tomato enthusiasts what we know, but to learn from them as well, because you never get to the bottom of understanding tomatoes and the varieties and how to best grow them. It's the greatest hobby in the world, I think.
When you said it was self-taught, I thought you were going to say it's self-pollinating.
That's a little tomato joke there, isn't it, Mike?
Yeah,
it's indeterminate.
All right, but 600 people. Wow. Now there is a tuition. It's not free. But I was looking at some of the comments, and people are blown away by what they're learning in this course.
And the other interesting thing is we're filming the course in our active garden. So with 10 modules, we've only got 7 of them filmed, and Joe is coming back to my house in a few weeks, and that's going to involve, we're going to do blind tomato tastings of different colored tomatoes, cook some recipes, troubleshoot the plants, talk about staking and pruning and all of that stuff that gardeners don't really do all that well, which leads to the pickup sticks effect in their tomato gardens by the end of the season. Because this is all being filmed, I am finally going to practice what I preach and have an orderly garden, so I say. We shall see how that works out.
Oh, wait a second. We're gonna see photos of your garden, and that's a lot more orderly than mine. I can tell you that right now. And I've seen Peggy's as well, so you're not doing so poorly there, my friend. All right, so to get us rolling here, I mentioned drought in the title to this, and we might as well get right into that. Craig, you said there's not much of a drought going on in North Carolina, although I have seen some maps with parts of the state are dry. Keith, go ahead, Craig.
As I sit here, the remnants of Claudette are passing over my house. And we actually had flash flood warnings for 3 to 5 inches of rain, but it took a more southerly tract. And I think we're getting about a ½ inch of rain. And as a tomato grower, I'm delighted with that, because I was really worried about totally saturated plants at this part of the growing season with the possibility of diseases and such. So thus far, I've been quite lucky with the weather conditions we've experienced. But,
we'll get into that then too, overwatering and having too much moisture for a plant. Now, Keith, you mentioned something really interesting the other day, which is you can almost, I get the feeling you're sitting there in Kansas City, Missouri, and you can almost feel the drought moving in from the west or something like that.
Well, I'm more concerned about the heat and a heat dome building over the west of me. So what it'll do is it'll influence both Kansas City and Chicago to some degree where that heat dome ends, because the tracks of the jet stream and the moisture and the cooler air will be coming around down that backside of the heat dome, and that'll affect how much moisture we get and very strong storms. And I'm particularly concerned about hail. But it'll be a deluge or a drought situation. But the heat in particular, if it builds, will make it really hot here, and that just influences the growing considerably.
Well, tell us what the heat does to a tomato plant. Obviously, you need some kind of heat for tomatoes to form and to ripen, but what are the limits of that, Keith?
Well, usually around above 90 degrees, and it's more of what they call a diurnal temperature, which is the average temperature throughout a 24-hour period of both the high and the low. So you maybe get up to 95, 100, but if it drops down cooler at night and the average is around 90, you're okay. But during that time when it's really hot, there is more energy expended on the plant trying to grow than there is it taking in. So problems like stress from diseases or pests or water usage all go down, and that plant suffers for it. It really doesn't grow much. It needs heat to develop flavor. That's like the number one thing that develops flavor. So it's important, but when it gets too much, the plant just can't handle it.
Would you agree with that, Craig?
Yeah, and one of the other incidences, as many people know, I lived in Raleigh for 28 years, and over that time span, the incidences of long heat waves were growing. So we were getting 90, 95 for 6, 7 days in a row, and then at night it would only cool down at the 80s. So fruit set was really affected, and I really like to grow the large fruited beefsteak types. Those seem to struggle the most with effective fruit set under times of extreme heat. So we were seeing gaps on the plant where you'd have a few fruit at the bottom, and you can almost read your plant to understand when the heat waves occurred, because you'd have blossom drop on those places where there should be tomatoes.
All right. I want to pop up, if I can find them, here they are, pop up a couple of things that you guys sent me. First of all, because this was the cover or the main photo on my blog post. And see, now that should have popped in. Okay, let's go here. There we go. There's tomatoes. Keith, that was pretty cool. Where did you find that?
Well, I developed all that. That's all my tomatoes. So,
wow.
There's working with the anthocyan ones in the top. I guess that would be left. That's actually got some of Craig's stuff back in it because it seems back to Cherokee Purple, and Brandywine is a parent line that was developed into stuff Jim Myers was doing. So I was trying to get a larger purple line out of that with really good flavor, but I'm still working on the flavor thing. But it's a beautiful tomato. The other one stems from a cross of Green Giant and Cherokee
Purple
Green.
Oh,
no, Cherokee Green.
Okay, is that the center one top?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And down below the purple one is a different variety. So I work a lot with genes that are from wild. So Craig is working with the heirlooms, and I'm working with the ancestors. So a lot of the fruit that I work with that are from the wild species are really small, cherry size and smaller sometimes. And that is an attempt to get a gene called delta lycopene, which is an orangish red color, into a larger fruited variety and have great taste. So that's an heirloom crossed with a species tomato, an ancient one if you want, to get that larger size.
And that's lower left. That's the lower left, right?
Lower left.
Okay.
The next one to it is one. It's not fully ripened, but it's another gene called apricot, which is yellowish with a little blush of pink to it. And then that's just a selection of things from the tomato plots I cut one year and put on a white plate.
Very cool.
So,
but
yeah,
you
I do
seem,
work with large ones too.
You seem to, Keith, be working a lot with the lycopene. You seem to be fascinated by that.
Well, there's a lot of these genes that are sitting in gene banks. So Craig rescued a lot of the heirloom varieties, but there's a lot of these genes that researchers recovered from like the 1930s all the way up into the 90s, going to South America and looking for and Central America and looking for the source material and bringing it back, particularly to UC Davis. They studied them. They mapped them. Where is that gene on the DNA? What are the genetics of it? How does it inherit? And they kind of just put it on the shelf, and not a lot of people have tried to use them in any way, but they impart different flavor, and they also have different nutritional profiles. So I became very interested in doing that. So it's kind of like my niche.
And I love that TV show, Find That Gene. It's one of my favorites. All right, let's look at this. You put together a little graphic that shows why it's important to water properly. Okay, on the left column, going from top to bottom, you will see short, shallow, frequent watering. So these are the people who come out with their hoses and they're kind of going, and then they say they're done. And then on the right is long, infrequent watering. Explain that graph a little bit, Keith.
Okay, so it does matter, like part of this matters because of how you set up your garden. digging deeply so that the roots can go down deeply. If somebody goes out and waters every day for, put the water on the plant for like 15 seconds, water the roots, not the plant, then you create this zone of just near the surface of where all the water is. Now, some of it is going to go down by gravity slowly, but the next panel is the forces working on that water in the plant and in the ground. But if you water longer, the water goes deeper. So if you're out there every day, putting water on each plant, 15 seconds and stuff, you're getting this really shallow root zone. And if you water deeply, but just like maybe once a week or once every 10 days, you're watering just about the same, but you're changing where the water is in the zone of the plant. So tomato plants, especially if the ground has been worked, will go down deep. And the last panel is trying to show you that the shallow roots stay in an area where evaporation and evapotranspiration, that's the water moving through the plant, have acted on that plant, and you get roots in a dried out zone, but on a deep watering, you get some that are down in the deeper zone. So when you have roots that are in that dry area, that's when you have issues with changes to the water status, and you get problems like blossom end drought. This up and down in watering can result in cracking, and it can also just affect the general health of the plant. So that's why mulching becomes so important and watering deeply. So I'd rather see somebody water deeply at a real low rate for a long time than to go out there every day and water.
And Craig, you were interviewed by Nikki Jabbour, who's been on this program. She's with Savvy Gardener, Savvy Gardening, savvygardening.com. And she wrote an article where you were quoted, and she said that garden-grown tomato plants need to be watered less often than those planted in containers. But you're really a container guy, Craig. So what are you doing to keep your containers hydrated?
Well, excuse me. I'm watering frequently and I'm watering deeply. So, but this sets up an interesting conundrum that I was thinking about, and it will relate to drought as well. I am a strong proponent of container gardening and straw bale gardening as techniques, particularly in cases like mine where I'm growing on a septic field, or the place that the sun was hitting in my previous house was the driveway. It works really well, and you can, given the understanding of what the differences are between what a plant needs in a container or a straw bale or a garden or a raised bed, you can pretty much grow anything in a container or a straw bale that you can in a garden. But then I'm thinking of the pressures of drought and the pressures of shortages of water. So I feel particularly fortunate that I can go out into my garden and water my grow bags daily, and I actually count to 5. The water starts coming out the bottom. And I'm watering my straw bales, I'm counting to between 20 and 30, depending on how warm it is. So that is super saturating the roots, and I've found that the roots in the straw bales and in the containers go all the way down to the bottom of the straw bale, as deeply as they can go. But not everybody can do this in the country right now, and so I'm really conflicted about being strong advocates for container and straw bale gardening, where some people in some areas are going to want to try that, but because of water shortages, try to say that 3 times fast, they may have a tough time keeping the plant sufficiently hydrated, and they will see some stress and blossom end drought. So I just feel very lucky right now, very fortunate that I can have the water necessary to be able to keep my plants in the straw bales and in the containers healthy. One of the things Joe Lample noted when he was here is I'm using 5-gallon grow bags with about 2.5 gallons of soil in them to grow indeterminate tomatoes. And people are saying, how can you do that? I'm pruning them to 1 or 2 shoots, and they're R&D plants. I'm not growing them to 8 feet tall. I'm not growing them for maximum production. You can use different size containers to do tomato R&D. I only need 1 cluster of fruit because I want to see what it looks like, what it tastes like, and save some seeds from it. So I like to kind of teach the flexibility of gardening and different approaches based on what kind of needs you have from your plant.
That's all right. I want to get into that too. The idea of pruning, because that is it's actually a little bit controversial in the world of. I'm glad to see you nodding there. Yes, Peggy.
We also have a couple of questions for watering that have popped up. If we want questions while we're on that topic.
I'll tell you what, we need to take a break right now. When we come back, why don't we hit those questions, Peggy? So take a look at that. We're talking to Craig LeHoullier, author of Epic Tomatoes, and Keith Mueller, tomato grower and breeder, also known as KC Tomato, out of Hannibal Mo. Shoeless Keith's from Hannibal Mo. Okay. Did we ever get an answer to where that came from? I have no idea whether we did. Anyway, it's the Mike Nowak.
Yankees.
It was damn Yankees.
Yeah, I looked it up.
Okay. It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Mueller, and we will be right back.
You know, summertime can mean a lot of fun for us, especially if we have access to swimming pools, air conditioning, or ice-cold drinks. But for others, it could be a real struggle, especially if you can't take shelter or go get a glass of water because you're, well, rooted. Lack of moisture is the most common cause of stress in a landscape, one that is particularly difficult on trees that are very young or very old. It could take months or even years for a tree to fully recover from drought conditions, and that's if it recovers at all. If the leaves or needles on your tree are wilting, discolored, or perhaps even falling off, they could be affected by drought conditions. If this stress is allowed to persist, this tree could be attacked by boring insects or even fall prey to stem and root disease. Sounds awful, right? But what can be done? I mean, you can't control the weather. Not to worry, because we can provide your trees with some much needed relief. We can give you guidance on mulching and irrigation. We can monitor your trees for boring insects, bark beetles, diseases, and other common problems that typically impact stressed trees. And upon the return of favorable conditions, fertilizing and pruning can go a long way to help your trees rebound and endure drought conditions.
Whether you're a farmer or a backyard gardener, assist your soil in providing key nutrients to your plants with Spectrum Soil Inoculum from Tineo Biologicals. The beneficial microorganisms in Spectrum break down and release vital nutrients and make them more accessible to your plants. Spectrum works with nature to decompose organic matter into humus, building richer, healthier soil. Spectrum is approved for use on certified organic crops and is OMRI listed. Get Spectrum at blazing-star.com.
Life is an ocean, streaming alone, ripples of motion, hitting us all, yeah.
Dive in, your time to win, our hearts all in, let's let the fun begin. Take a dive, take a dive, take a dive. Climbing high, I see you diving. Take a dive, take a dive, take a dive. I see you diving high, I see you climbing high, I see you diving. Dive smart, dive smart, dive hard, dive hard, dive hard, dive hard, dive in. Dive smart, dive smart, dive hard, dive hard, dive hard, dive hard.
You have the ability to give your soil a superpower. It's called composting. If you don't have a backyard, you need to contact Collective Resource Compost. CRC has diverted 7,000 tons of food scraps since 2010. They bring you a fresh 5-gallon bucket or a 32-gallon neighbor tote with each pickup. You fill it with organic matter from your kitchen, they swap it out and get it to a commercial composting operation. Fight climate change. Go to collectiveresource.us. And speaking of composting, we just got a note from our friend Sarah Batka at Illinois Extension. She says, "Hey, can you mention our compost collection event this Saturday, June 26th in Park Forest? It's 7 a.m. to 12 noon." And here's the link. It is at Forest Boulevard in Liberty Drive in Park Forest. Again, from 7 a.m. to noon this Saturday, June 26th. So the idea is you drop off your yard / kitchen / garden waste to be composted and stay for free giveaways. And you can even bring, although I don't know why anybody would bring their grass clippings, man, they're so valuable nitrogen for your own compost pile, but not everybody has a compost pile. But you can bring grass clippings, leaves, landscape waste. And boy, have I got some bags of landscape waste. I should schlep them all down there because I don't trust the city of Chicago to pick them up proper and dispose of them properly. You know, that's what I should do. Sarah, I might come down there with about 6 bags of yard waste, which have been sitting in my garage for way too long. So, there you go, and that's our shout out to Illinois Extension. Welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki, talking to the tomato experts here in Tomatomania III, the looming drought. We've been talking a little bit about watering and drought. Yes, Keith. What? You're
I'm pointing to Craig, that guy. He's the expert.
Oh, no, that's not true. Now, obviously, that's not true. Any guy that can breed a tomato has got to know something about that. And I've grown your tomatoes, and they're excellent. So, no, you can't get away with that on this show. Peggy, let's go to some of those questions and see if we can't answer them.
We have one question here from Michael who says, "I thought tomato roots only grow in the top 6 inches of soil." So how deep do they grow? How far do they go?
Keith?
I don't know exactly how deep. I've heard 24 inches, but that's like in a setting so that they can do that. It depends on how deep you work that soil, the soil conditions, how deep they're going to go. Because if they hit a plow pan or a cultivated pan, if you have that built up and you don't do things like double digging, they'll go down and just kind of run out laterally and not go down that deep. So it depends on how you water and how well that soil's worked. But they can go down easily 12 inches, maybe 18. You know,
so my straw bales are 24 inches tall, and at the end of the year, when I pull those plants out, the roots are actually through the bales into the ground, and they're in the ground about 6 to 8 inches. So they are massive, and a straw bale is the equivalent of about 2 20-gallon containers. So tomatoes have plenty of room to, and which is why I like straw bales, because you think about what it would cost to get good quality potting mix to fill 2 20-gallon containers, and you use a $6 straw bale. That makes its own loam. So I think it's a really good method for that.
Not to get too technical here too, but a lot of the roots will go out near the surface because that's where the oxygen is, and that's where a lot of the microbial activity hopefully is. And so that is an important zone, and that is a good reason to mulch. But they will go down deeper, and if those roots could get deeper and get into that more stable moisture that's not evaporating off, that's better for the plant. That's the point I was trying to make earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm stepping out on some of my plants this year as well, Keith, which are the little bumps near the bottom of the plant, and roots will come out. And I've never considered that a bad thing. It just happens, and it happens to a lot of my plants.
Okay.
Well, so then related to that would be Mac's question of
yes,
the watering methods that you showed of the longer watering as opposed to the shallow. Does this work in shallow raised beds? Or how should we be watering in shallow raised
Craig,
beds?
why don't you start with that?
Well, so it depends on the depth of the soil and array. I mean, you should always water deeply, but is it a 6-inch raised bed? Is it 1.5, or is it 2 feet? And what's under the raised bed? I know that I've not used them that often, but I've got one on my lawn that's about a foot deep. And again, the roots are going, it's on the lawn, and the roots of the plants are going through into the lawn. So deeper is better for raised beds for sure, especially for plants like tomatoes. Keith?
I froze up there. I don't know what happened. I missed all that.
I was just saying deeper is better in raised beds, and certainly if you want to grow tomatoes, 6 or 10 inches is probably not enough soil. You want to have a good depth, if you can, to let those roots really stretch out.
Okay.
I would just note that in this time, you can't really see that. We have rain on the way.
Oh my goodness.
I sent it out, Keith.
Craig was doing his rain dance.
Went to the post office, had him ship you a little bit, so I hope you enjoy it.
Let's get to the idea of because I want to show some of the other stuff that Keith. Oh, wait a second! Oh my goodness, I didn't pop these up here. I wanted to show those wonderful photos of the cracked tomato. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I've got to forward that to myself, but I can get the conversation started by taking us to Craig's backyard, because we were talking about how you grow tomatoes here. And tell us what we're looking at.
That is one of my main R&D sections where I'm doing hot pepper, and I save seeds from it and grow out the second generation and find diversity, and then follow through on different things. I've got eggplant growing in 5-gallon grow bags. I've also got some dwarf tomato project varieties growing as well. And I've got them up on a pallet because when we get rain here, it can really flow down over that gravel. And I didn't want, tomatoes really don't like wet feet. So this helps for them to stay healthy.
All right. And then this, not many people have this in their backyard.
There's my garden. And so there's a few really interesting anecdotes about this. The first of which being we have 2 large rescue dogs and a small one. And my wife Sue said, "Don't you think the dogs are going to, run into your tomato plants?" They think I've set up the coolest obstacle course in the world. And when we're out in the hammock, they are spending hours running through, and they have yet to clip a plant or a straw bale. It's just agility training for them. So what you see there are 28 straw bales. 20 of them contain indeterminate tomatoes, 2 each. And then on the left side near the hammock are sets of 4 bales pushed together. One of that cluster contains 3 rows of bush beans. The other contains 4 hills of summer squash. What's interesting about straw bales is we've been picking squash and beans about 40 days from direct seeding. The heat being generated by the center of those bales as they compost advances the maturity dates for direct seeded things like beans and squash. Everything is growing well. I go out every day, remove the yellow lower or blemish lower foliage, tie things up. You're seeing that garden staked pretty well and pruned pretty well right now.
It's just remarkable. You talked about your garden being messy. That is not messy, okay? That is ridiculous, actually. Let's look at this. Are you just showing off by showing us that you have tomatoes already?
I have really good fruit set, and the reason is we have not had an overabundance of rain, meaning I'm doing most of the watering. I water at the base of the plant deeply, so we're not suffering much blossom drop. And the relative lack of rain has kept the foliage dry, meaning I'm not seeing very much septoria, leaf spot, or early blight. And even the critters have been kept down. First I've been finding are a few aphids, but yeah, I'm going to, if I average 20 pounds of fruit for the 90 plants that I'm growing, I'll be doing a lot of canning. And maybe people want to do a little caravan out to my house in Hendersonville. It's going to be a fun year. Almost everything in it is a mystery, a new project. I've got 10 of my favorites growing. Everything else, I have no idea what the outcomes are going to be.
Yeah. And now this is something that Keith sent me. Whoops, and I shouldn't have done that, but here we go. What are we looking at? This is obviously some kind of disease.
That's probably one of the most common leaf spot diseases that people listening to are exposed to. It's called septoria, and I had a close-up of that. Those are smaller spots, It does look like a few other bacterial problems, which in the north some people can have. I don't really want to get into that. This is more common, septoria, and so they're small little spots of at most eighth to maybe a quarter of an inch wide. They're tan or they're gray like that, and there may be a little bit of yellow halo near the lesion. But this is a disease seems to be getting more prevalent, and unfortunately, there's no real good sources of resistance for that currently. There's a few lines. They have what's called or horizontal resistance to them, but that doesn't really hold up real well unless that's kind of complex. But the whole garden is planted to that variety. The resistance holds up well, but if you've got things mixed in, it's a little bit iffy because those other lines become sources of inoculum for the septoria, and it just kind of takes off anyway. So I think breeders in Cornell and I think in Pennsylvania State are working on septoria, and people in the USDA, but so far nothing that I've seen really blocks it. There's a theory that stink bugs, the brown, I don't know if I'm saying this right, brown marmorated stink bug, which moves around at night compared to the more common green stink bug, which is only in the day, is moving that disease around at night while the plant's moist and transmitting it. But nobody's really proved that yet. But that could be the reason why septoria is really taking off. But people are going to probably see that in the viewing area.
All right, and then we have...
This is classic early blight. In fact, I took the picture just yesterday. I'm taking care of tomatoes for a neighbor, and I found that on there. So early blight has the yellow halo around it. The lesion makes a target-like appearance, and it's because that lesion is growing and expanding, just like tree rings. And on a plant where it's really taking off, those lesions will coalesce, join together, and it'll defoliate the whole plant. This is another very common disease. They both need moisture, and they both need warm temperatures to take off. And so once you have those conditions, even morning dew can do it. So there are some sources of resistance for this. It's what they call the vertical resistance. So I think I got that right. But the best things that people have for this without resorting to sprays is to pick these lesions off before they get taken over and orient your plants in a way so that airflow or sunlight gets to them, particularly in the morning, if that's possible. So space plants further apart. But that watering comes key with both of these, in that you don't water the foliage, you water the roots. So soaker hoses and keeping, in particularly early blight, the soil from rain splashing back up onto the plant and transferring that inoculum is important. So all that's really key to those particular leaf diseases. Those are very common.
Yeah, and most people, they're going to put sprinkler on and or just splash the water on it, and it really does affect the ability of the plant to catch a disease, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
And this came from Craig. Is this the dreaded late blight?
This is a dwarf called Dwarf Walter's Fancy that is being sold by the Victory Seed Company, at least, probably others, and we intentionally bred a variety called variegated.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a disease.
No, that's one of our, I call them ornamental tomato plants for those that really want to put something a little eye-popping in their garden, and the variegation on this variety holds very well. And it produces 8-ounce, delicious, ivory-colored tomatoes. I named it after my grandfather, Walter, who was really the person who stimulated the interest in gardening in me many, many years ago.
Okay, see, and I completely got it wrong because there was no key to it, and that's very interesting. I thought, okay, because you had talked about late blight the other day, and
Right.
you'd seen it finally in your, and somebody's shuddering there, so that's not a good thing, obviously. Let's go to this because I finally tracked this down, and this, Keith, you sent this to me, and we just had a question from Gloria who says. She wants to know about splitting when tomatoes start to ripen in containers. Well, talk about some of these splits, Keith.
Okay, so I wanted to bring this up because they're all forms of cracking. But as the tomato fruit develops, it goes from a little pea size into like a golf ball size into the regular full-size tomato. The cells are doing different things, but once they've ripened, that growth stops and they will crack for a different reason, and that's called bursting, actually. So sun golds, thin-skinned, particularly pink tomatoes tend to burst more. That's a subtle thing, and when you're breeding, that's important because people go, oh, those tomatoes crack. Well, did they burst or did they crack? So the real way to separate that is if they're green, generally, that's when they're cracking. But if they're ripe, it's when they're bursting. And it has to do with some of the same reasons. It's watering, it's fertilizer uptake, it's changes in the up and down of watering. And that's, again, why you water deep and you mulch. You try to keep that soil consistently moist, and they're not as susceptible to this up and down in water movement and nutrition. The first one's radial cracking, where it's like longitudinal lines on the map, runs usually from the top or the bottom to the top. The other one's concentric, which either is in rings or sometimes they make interesting spiral patterns. The next one is weather checking, and that poor tomato has a bunch of different reasons that's doing that, but it's got both weather check, which are the fine little concentric cracks running out, but it also has concentric cracking too. That is a green shouldered plant. Even when the fruit is ripe, it has a green tint to it. And it's believed that the sun hits that, moisture gets on the shoulders and causes what they call weather checking, but they don't know the exact reason of weather checking.
That's pretty spectacular, though. It really, a lot of people would. Now, is that edible? I would assume it is.
It was edible. Cut that part off, and the rest of it below it was fine.
Yeah, no, I've seen tomatoes even at markets like that, or coming out of the garden.
And then the bursting.
So the fruit is already ripe. It hasn't really cracked yet, but what's happening is either someone applied fertilizer or it set dry for a while, and then rain came, and the water just made that boom, that tensile strength not hold on the skin and pop open. Now, sun golds will do that, and some other cherry varieties. When you pick them, you take the stem off. Can you go live here?
Yeah, a lot of cherries I notice do that. As you're picking them, they're suddenly bursting.
Okay. Wait, let me get the close up here for you. Okay. Thank you. Hold on. If the thing will click, that would be good. There we go.
Okay. So when you first take this, I got to orient myself here. This is different.
I know it's backward. It's really strange.
Okay. So when you first take this off, a lot of times, and you break the pedestal off, they will burst and crack there from that point of attachment.
Really?
This one didn't happen to do it. Yeah, it's really notorious on sun golds and the sweet million cherry tomatoes. But the pink tomatoes, the clear skin tomatoes, are generally a little bit thinner. The skin and the tensile strength is so they'll burst real easy. They'll also crack easier.
Yeah.
And then the fasciated tomatoes, the bumpy large ones, do that too.
I found black cherry cracks really easily. I always advise people, if it's going to rain, go out and pick your cherry tomatoes, or else when you come back the next day, they're all going to be popped. Yeah.
Huh. Now, let me ask, is it really the worst thing in the world if a tomato cracks?
The fruit flies will find it pretty quickly
Oh,
and
okay.
start poking around that crack, and they have no shelf life whatsoever. Overly ripe sun golds, I find, are not the most pleasant thing to eat. And Keith seems to think the same thing. They get really funky. I mean, Keith was showing it. So if people hear the word physiological effects, that's really what we've been talking about. And they're not genetic things so much as the effect of conditions on the tomato. Blossom end rot would be another one that would be a physiological effect. But what I've found is that if I pick the tomato at about 1/2 to 3/4 ripe, particularly the larger fruited ones, I can get them in the house with much less cracking, and just sitting on the shelf in my kitchen for 2 days, they'll fully ripen up, and they will taste indistinguishable from tomatoes that hang on the vine. Critters can be more attracted to tomatoes that are left to hang on the vine as vine ripe. So I try to not let any of my tomatoes go vine ripe anymore. Because of perishability, because of cracks, and because of hungry critters.
Yeah.
It's nothing like watching that tomato for just ripe. You come out, there's a chomp out of it. Yeah.
Well,
Yep.
we got to the point last year. This was a new strategy for us in our yard. We got to the point last year where if a tomato just had a sign of blush, we yanked it. We pulled it off the vine because the critters were wreaking havoc with it. And one thing we tried, though, Kathleen did that worked very well. She found a store of old nylons, and we would wrap the tomatoes in the nylons, and the critters left them alone, and they ripened on the vine. So you can't do that if you've got thousands of tomatoes, obviously, but if you've got a few that you cherish. Before we go here, because we're getting to the end of it, Craig, we got to give you a chance to. We've already mentioned your class, but the dwarf tomato project.
Yeah, really, if anybody, the best way to reach me is just nctomatoman@gmail.com or my website, craiglehoulier.com. Find me at Instagram on @nctomatoman. I'm on Facebook again now. But I'm really happy to answer questions that people may have. The Dwarf Tomato Project, if people go to Victory Seed Company, they carry all 133 of our releases. And if people want to jump in and help us, send me an email and we'll get you some seeds next year and have you be one of our testers and experimenters.
You mentioned before the show started today the Mexican midget tomato, and explain to people what that is.
I was actually just about to text Keith something about it. I'm convinced there's something unique about Mexico midget. It's a variety
Mexico midget. Okay.
Mexico midget. It's a variety sent to me by a man named Barney Lehman in California. He was in his 80s when he sent it to me in 1990. His brother acquired it from Mexico when he was delivering hay back and forth over the border, and is the only tomato in my collection of 4,000 or so that don't germinate like all of the others. I have found a way to make it germinate properly, but no seed company sells the authentic variety because no one can get it to meet germination standards. But I've figured out a way to do that. It is literally the size of a pea, and I'm talking about open up a pea pod, you can slip 4 or 5 Mexico midgets in there. Really good flavor, and we're starting to use it to breed some of our dwarfs that are coming out really good.
That's because I grew a Mexico midget several years ago, but it wasn't that at all. So we must have had one of the copycats.
Seed Savers knows they've got the wrong variety. They just don't know what to do about it, because when a company has been selling a crossed variety for years and years and years, what do? They've got the right variety. They just haven't figured out a way to deal with it. So really, I'm the only person people can get it from at this point.
Yeah. And what's your favorite dwarf at this point of the new ones that came out this year?
Oh gosh, Dwarf Purple Heartthrob is really cool. It is an 8-ounce, strong heart-shaped purple, the color of Cherokee purple, with jagged gold and greenish lines on it, and it's really it's got that deep crimson flesh that Keith knows well. The ones that the black tomatoes have, where I guess there's some chlorophyll retention going in there, Keith, to keep that deep color, or is it just a dark crimson gene that's controlling that?
Probably both.
Yeah. Really good.
And explain really shortly, what is it that makes a dwarf tomato? Why are they called dwarf?
There's a gene that creates a tomato variety, and the first one actually popped up in the 1850s, but no one really did a lot of work with them. A very thick central stem. I find they behave like indeterminants that expand upward at half the rate of a true indeterminate. So to me, they combine the beauty of the determinants and being compact with the generally gradual fruiting of the indeterminates, meaning they can develop really good flavors. And they're just a great thing for a container and patio and deck gardeners to put in a 5-gallon pot and enjoy the quality and the excitement of growing all of the different colored and flavored heirloom types. And, you know, we're waiting to see. They're out there. The court of public opinion is going to let us know what they think of them.
But I grew a dwarf, and it's last year, and again, it's so much easier to manage because it's not 7 feet tall, and
and there's still potato leaf varieties and regular varieties and
variegated anthocyanin, hearts, you name it. We got some with chartreuse, working on one with yellowish foliage this year. So what the heck?
Yeah.
Why?
Well,
because I can.
Exactly. This is why. This is why you guys were part of Tomatomania 3. Thank you, Craig LeHoullier. As he just mentioned, you can go to his website, craiglehoulier.com. He's also on Facebook. He's on the Gram. You can go there. Keith is on Facebook. He's on Twitter. You gave up on Twitter, right, Craig?
Yep. I'm off Twitter. I was off Facebook for a while as well, but I was cajoled to re-enter.
I'm getting ready to bail on some of these social media too. I'll tell you. But Keith is always a presence as KC Tomato. You can find him everywhere. And by the way, the links are on my. I don't think I added the link that you sent me last year. I have to put it up there, Keith. But it was is that old page still up there that you've had?
It is still there.
Like
it's still there.
KDCom.net.
Yeah,
yes.
with
Since
all the
1994.
Holy smoke! Okay, I got to put that link up there so that folks can.
Vintage.
It is absolutely.
You're lucky. My old website host got hacked, and I can't edit or anything, so I just ignore it. So
that's
you're
a
lucky
shame.
that it's still there.
I would like to point out too. Both Craig and I are involved in a cooperative breeding project.
Oh, right! Thank you.
And it's through USDA funding with Organic Seed Alliance, several universities, Julie Dawson at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. It's called SeedLink, and you can go to seedlink.com, and you can look up these cooperative breeding projects, both the Dwarf Project and some of the stuff that I'm doing. So it helps me work and collaborate with other growers and chefs, the girls at Tomato Bliss that started there in Chicago and are now canning heirloom tomatoes and things. They just got picked up by Milk Street, but they're on that too. So you can see what other people are getting from the different varieties, and it helps people choose things for their garden, particularly focusing in on the Midwest.
Yeah.
Great, and I have those links. Actually, I just forgot to mention it, but if you go to my blog post under the headline Keith Mueller, aka KC Tomato, you will see the link to the USDA's Organic Agricultural Research and Extension Initiative, the Organic Seed Alliance, and SeedLinked. The links are all there. So I'm your friend, Keith. I'm trying to get it right. I just happen to forget things sometimes.
I just want 30 seconds on that. Why it's really important is Keith's breeding tomatoes and I'm breeding tomatoes. We can't answer the question from someone in New Hampshire or Seattle or California or Florida. How will these tomatoes do for me? We will someday, but we don't know yet. So what we need is feedback from people who are trying the various dwarfs and the various tomatoes Keith are breeding. How are they doing where you are? Because there are going to be local adaptations to these varieties. They're going to be happier in some places than others. It will help us to know it so that we can then guide people and help them succeed in growing these.
Yeah, it's all about citizen science, and that's the key part of this. So, folks, you can get involved too. Go to those links. They should start. Should they start with SeedLinked, Keith?
Sure.
Oh, or any of them, whatever, and just see how you can help out. Craig and Keith, thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. I can't wait for Tomatomania 4.
Yes.
But I hope we talk before then. All right, you guys have a great day and much success to you in gardening. Keep us posted about everything going on. Okay.
Thank you, Mike and Peggy, and take care, Keith.
All right, we shall return.
When I'm with an older tree, and there's just something about it that draws you to it, as similar to the ocean draws you to it. And when I see a big tree and I'm gonna climb it, I enjoy that moment and I'll give the tree a big old hug. My name's Chase Ferris. I work out of the Clackamas office just outside Portland, Oregon. I've been with Bartlett Tree Experts since October of 2016, and I'm a climber. I was kind of surprised and taken back by the quality of equipment and the amount of effort that goes into keeping everyone safe and keeping the jobs productive and making sure that you are progressing every day. And I enjoy that because I like to learn. I like the Raptor, and we use it quite a bit out on the West Coast. Our trees are pretty tall, and the Raptor is great for saving energy, allowing you to get into the canopy with minimal physical exertion so that you're fresh and ready to climb and do what you need to do, when you're 65, 70 feet up or higher. So at my office, I feel like you could take just about anyone, put a crew together, and send them out to a job and have it be successful. And that has to do with trusting the people you work with, feeling safe around them, and knowing their strengths and weaknesses. Every tree needs a champion.
Welcome to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. Green, gardening, and environment radio with just a soupçon of humor. Or is that a dash? Brought to you by Bartlett Tree Experts. Every tree needs a champion. Go to bartlett.com. Here they are again, Peggy Malecki and Mike Nowak.
All I need is good food to eat and make me healthy, wealthy, wide awake. Lettuce, tomatoes, rutabaga. What about those sweet potatoes? All I need is good food to eat. All I need is good food to eat. All I need is good tools to make me music, porches, lawn serene. Give me all that I can.
And welcome back to the show. And I know that some of you, guess what, have been dealing with streaming problems again. And guess what? It's Comcast. Yes. Thank you, Comcast, for nothing. And that's what I'm going to do a commercial for them and say, thank you for nothing. But it's now I notice that now the stream is back. It's strong. Yeah, great. After the tomato guys. But don't worry if you were having issues and it was bumping along. We've got the recording like we did last week. We'll pop it up and you'll be able to see all the way through. We just love having Craig and Keith on the show. They sure know their stuff and they're a lot of fun. So it's such a pleasure to have them here. And guess
have 3 hours of Tomatomania.
Yeah, exactly. And guess who's going to be on the phone with Comcast after the show? There we go. So we need to start with you're going to do the first one, Peggy. Here, it's going to be this little segment we call. Whoops. Okay, I don't know why it had that stuff up there. It shouldn't have had.
What you learned this week? You hate Comcast. Oh, wait a minute. We knew that.
Wait, I hate myself because it did this. Shouldn't be doing that. All right. Okay. So, Peggy, you get to start us off about what you learned this week.
Well, let's see. It's kind of tricky to figure that out, but I did learn a new color, and I learned that from my friend Mike Nowak.
What? A color?
I'm so darned tasteful, It hurts to look at me burgundy.
Okay. You're, I know what you're talking about, and thank you for mentioning that, because, I had another piece pop up on Garden Rant. Go to gardenrant.com, and it's a piece I wrote about the Dr. Huey rose. Tell us what a Dr. Huey rose is, Peggy.
It is a rose. Well, Captain George C. Thoman in 1914, you said, originally came up with the rose. And,
Captain George C. Thoman.
In 1920 by Bob Incan Atkins. It's a hybrid Witcherana. But it's a rambling rose in the color, I'm so darn tasteful, it hurts to look at me burgundy. Flowers with yellow stamens.
Well, but the important...
Invasive? No. Prone to black spot?
Yep, all those bad things. But the important thing is now it's used basically as stock rose.
As stock buried
So what you do is
underground.
you graft the pink or the yellow or the white rose on top of it, and that is underground. And what happens is the top part of your rose dies over the winter, and then this oh so tasteful, it hurts to look at me, burgundy colored rose comes
Takes
up.
over.
And if you wonder why sometimes you have a rose and it seems to revert, that's because it's the stock part of the rose coming up the next
It
year.
has usurped back its right to bloom.
Exactly. So anyway, I'm glad you learned that. And even if it was
That
from me.
that was my original one before the one I mentioned about the butter, which I'll save for another week.
No. You got to do the butter because it happened this week. Okay, something else about butter. What did you learn about butter?
Yes, soft butter that when you actually manage to drop the dish, of course, will flip over 180, and it will take you days to find the little bits of butter that have splattered all over your kitchen. Yes.
And yeah, I get that. That is, I've been there, done that.
Who's coughing in the
I
background?
don't know. I'm just like, who could possibly still be around? So somebody's got to be. Oh, I think Keith is still there. Keith,
I have a squirrel looking in my window with its front paws on the screen, right outside my computer here.
Okay, Keith, are you just watching the program here in the background?
Yeah, I was just watching, and I think my son coughed or something.
Oh, okay. So
I'll turn the mic off.
I can do that too here. Glad you're watching the show. Great. You're like one of three people now. Great. Okay.
That and the squirrel outside my window that's still here, stuck to my screen.
Stuck to your screen? That's just
staring at me.
that is weird. Okay. That's something to do on a Sunday morning while you're attempting to do a live stream broadcast or whatever we call it these days. Okay, here's my what I learned this week, and it's about rain barrels, and I learned a couple of things. All right, so here's
go back a week though to what happened to your downspout to set the.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to do. It starts with the first rain we had here in a long time was last week. And I was overjoyed, and I went out the back, and it's raining, and we're getting rain in the yard, and I'm looking at my gutter, and the water is pouring down onto my porch, the gutter is overflowing, and I'm like, what the heck is that all about? So I'm reaching up around the top because I'm right by the area where it goes into the downspout, and I'm cleaning it out, and the downspout's clean, and it's at least the area going in, and it's still overflowing. And so I start grabbing the downspout, and it comes loose, and it comes off. And now the water's just pouring down, and the downspout's flopping over, and I have to kind of lean it and say, okay, I'll wait till the rain's over, and then I will deal with this. So a day or two later, I look out, and the downspout's still leaning against the porch. I went, okay, let's fix that. So I grab the downspout, and I get my tools, and the downspout's really heavy. And I'm like, what the heck? A downspouts not heavy. It's basically air. It was surrounded by aluminum. Yeah. And I realized that at 2 points in the downspout is completely clogged with leaf matter and whatever's come off the roof for the last, 10 years. So I'm jamming that stuff out. And of course, I throw it into my yard because it's compost. And but I cleared that out, and I went, well, no wonder the thing's so heavy. And so I reattach the downspout, and it's firmer than ever, and I'm really happy about it. So I don't know why this happened, but a couple of days later, I think it was Kathleen, because we had forecast of more rain coming, and she said, with the drought conditions, we really should be saving this water. let's put it in our rain barrels, because I've had 2 rain barrels sitting in the yard for, I don't know, 6 years since the community garden folded that we were part of. And I had, and, for 6 years been meaning to attach them. And I said, okay, it's probably time to do that. So we do some research. We find a rain barrel kit, and we attach. We go out to the local box store. This was a Menards, and they had this kit, and I brought it home, and I'm attaching, and it actually wasn't that hard. Put it all together. Did a test. I had the hose go up on the roof and the water drain, and going in the rain barrel. We connected it to the other rain barrel, so that what happens if you connect them at the bottom, they'll fill up like this together, which is
got them in series there.
Yeah, and we went cool, and it's going to rain tonight, so this is good timing and done. Well, not done, actually, as it turns out, because. But wait, well, this was a storm that blew through here. It was pretty ferocious when it came through. I saw it on the radar when I woke up, but I could hear it in the night. Lots of wind. And Kathleen comes to me in the morning and says, one of the rain barrels tipped over. I went, tipped over? What? And I figured out that... probably what happened is when that first blast of wind came, when that storm front came through, there was nothing in the rain barrel. It was empty. And it tipped it over, not all the way, because it's attached to the downspout with this hose. And so it tipped as far as it could go, and then the hose goes and stretches out, and it's holding the rain barrel at this rakish angle. Okay, actually like this angle. And it's also being held to the other rain barrel by the hose at the bottom where they're joined. So it's at this angle. So what happens is it was still connected to the downspout. And even at this angle, it's collecting water. So now I got a rain barrel half full of water, which is 55 gallons is the rain barrel. So, I got 25, 30 gallons of water.
Let's see, 8 pounds a gallon.
Yeah, something like that. And we're trying to figure.
Got my calculator here. Let's
trying to figure out how to. I can't just push it up because it's too heavy, and it has made the cinder blocks it's on slip a little bit. So it's so now we open the spigot at the bottom of it, and we start draining the water into other containers so that we can save the water, because we don't want to lose those containers, that water, because it's water right now is very precious in the
water,
Yeah, and we're in a drought here in the Midwest, and we'll find out more about this from meteorologist Rick DiMaio in a few minutes.
And it's dechlorinated, so even better.
And exactly, it's dechlor, although it's got all the bird poop and everything from the roof. But you don't drink that water, folks. By the way, don't drink the water out of your rain barrel. Okay, it's not potable. So we managed to get a lot of this into various tubs. Finally, the rain barrel's loose enough so that we and get it back into position. Meanwhile, the bottom hose finally gave, and it popped out of one of them. So I had to redo that. The upper hose that had was holding it onto the gutter. The downspout was still intact. Just amazing that it was still there. So by the end of the day, I had it fixed, and now they're set, and we're supposed to get more rain today. We'll see how well that works. If it blows over again, I'm just going to melt it down, and I don't know what to do with. But that is
all in half, and you make it a planter.
Something like that. But it never occurred to me that the first gust of wind could blow over an empty rain barrel. It's not something you prepare for. It's not something you think of. And worse, if it had just blown over and the connection had broken, I would have just lifted it up and put it back into position and gotten a new connection. But the connection held, and so it filled with water, even though it was tilted at that angle.
So this is in the back of your yard on the left-hand side, looking into your yard. So you're like stepping over plants and stuff to get to it? Oh.
No, it's right by the porch. So Yeah, right behind the porch. In fact, it fell over onto one of my indoor plants and broke off a few leaves, so I had to do some pruning there. But that plant's okay; it's going to be fine. Yeah, it was a bit of a mess. So that is.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Yep, that's what I learned this week. So we have there's an irony here. We have all these great guests talking very important stuff about how to grow tomatoes and great advice, and the stream is like going wonk 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 wonk. And now we have my dumb story about how I can't even set up a rain barrel properly, and I waited 6 years to do it. And it's streaming clear. It's out there. Everybody knows this story. Nobody's going to.
It's out there forevermore. Yes.
It is on the inner tube. In fact, it'll be getting to the planet Saturn in about 6 days, and then it'll join the Voyagers out there in space and
Yeah, in the cosmos. Yes, heading for the Delta Quadrant. Yes.
New horizons. Okay, yeah. So, what else did we have here? We got a few minutes. We got a few more things that we wanted.
What's going on with Kane County and their new recycling?
Oh, right. Let me find that here because I got a notice the other day from my friend Jennifer Jarland, and she is the Kane County Recycling Program Coordinator. And she's very excited because Kane County is opening a third permanent recycling center. This one's in Aurora, and I'm surprised they didn't have one in Aurora already because obviously that's the largest town in Kane County, city in Kane County. And it's going to handle electronics, appliances, clothing, and scrap metal. So now they have recycling across all of Kane County in the southern area, which is Aurora, central area, which is Batavia, and West Dundee for the northern area. They're open to the general public, all three recycling centers, and to businesses as well. Businesses need to identify themselves as businesses, which is as simple as bringing a business card to the staff person. And it is just so cool that they're doing this, and the grand opening is tomorrow, June 21st. They're going to be open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. year-round. I don't know how many of our listeners are out in Kane County, but this is really good for you guys. They will accept items, appliances like toasters, blenders, microwaves, no Freon-containing devices. Electronics, they have an accepted items list. So,
You need to pay for TV recycling, though,
right? And that's because it's a $25 fee for screens under 21 inches and $35 for screens 21 inches or larger. And here's the reason you got to do that, folks. Not everything's a free ride. Electronics are banned from Illinois landfills and must be recycled. TVs and monitors contain lead and or mercury and must be processed as hazardous material, a more expensive process that makes the consumer-based fee a necessity. And the fee is paid directly to the county's contracted electronics recycler, eWorks Electronic Services, a nonprofit located in Elk Grove Village that employs people with developmental disabilities, and it helps to cover their costs to recycle these items. You're helping a good cause and responsibly and legally disposing of your used electronics. So that's a good thing. So if you want more information, go to countyofkane, KANE.org/recycling. It's as simple as that. And congratulations to Kane County. And I thank Jennifer Jarland for giving me that information. I'm going to mention just really briefly, because we'll get to Monty and Rose. I'll let you do a quick Monty and Rose update. You might have heard that the the Illinois General Assembly was trying to pass the Clean Energy Jobs Act. That has not happened. And they got to the end of
Nothing
this.
has happened.
Nothing. Right. And it's being held up by coal plants and by gas-fired plants and by nuclear plants and trying to get together on all of those. I think what we need to do, Peggy, is have a couple of experts. We've been thinking of getting a Dave Kraft from the what is it? The Energy Information Nuclear Energy NEIS.
NEIS.
Nuclear Energy Information Service, NEIS. And because he's got very strong views about nuclear energy, and it does feel like we're being held hostage by the nuclear plants in Illinois, since the governor's trying to bail them out, and they were bailed out in the last negotiations back in 2016. And now we've got issues about when we can decommission coal plants and decommission natural gas, methane plants. Let's call them methane. That's the new thing. Natural gas is just another way of saying methane, folks. So I'm just bringing that up because I've gotten emails from our friend Lisa Albrecht, and from the Illinois Environmental Council, and other people are just saying, "Hey, we got to get this through," and we talked about it on the show a few weeks ago, and nothing happened. Now, I shouldn't say nothing because there's all kinds of negotiations behind the scene, but nothing got passed, and we're still, and it's hard to say what will happen.
Thinking when they come back, maybe, but can't tell.
And it makes it harder now because they need now a bigger majority to pass this stuff. Although I don't know. Well, I do know. It's the usual stuff. It's politics and energy and the lobbyists and the money.
Backroom deals.
We'll see what happens with that. So let's, on an upbeat note, let's talk Monty and Rose.
Monty and Rose, Chicago's famed Great Lakes piping plovers, back for a third year at Montrose Beach.
Yay!
We reported last week or the week before that the eggs had been eaten by a skunk that reached into the enclosure.
Yikes.
Earlier this week, they reported one new egg was seen, but now, as of the 18th, 4 eggs on the nest. Surveillance camera has revealed that Monty and Rose now have 4 eggs, their second one of the season, after the first was breached by a skunk. They've put a much larger enclosure over the whole nest now to protect it from predators so that they can't reach in. And it's being very, very closely monitored. And it looks like hopefully 4 eggs will hatch with any luck.
Well, if no more skunks get involved in
something
this.
would have to get in now, because before, apparently, the nest was close enough to the side of the cage that the skunk could reach in. Now something would have to actually breach it and get in.
Well, what I read was that there was a hinge or a flange or a connector that failed on the old cage, and that was the reason. It was that the cage was designed well enough, except there was a failure in one of the parts of it. That's what I saw.
Okay. Well, there's a whole new enclosure that's up now, and this is according to ChicagoPipingPlovers.org. A new, very large enclosure placed over the nest.
Yeah, and I think they've learned their lesson from the. But that's, as I said before, that's nature. That's the way these things work.
That's what skunks go after.
Yeah,
bird eggs.
Exactly. So I'm glad to see that Monty and Rose are back at it. This just, if that isn't inspiration, I don't know what is. Okay. The only other thing that I wanted to get to, but I'm not sure if it's necessary at the moment, is I got actually a couple of weeks ago got a notice from Open Lands. You can go to openlands.org about drought conditions and what you should be doing. Now, I'm hoping that we're going to break the drought. We've had some rain a couple of times this past week. You only had it once, really.
You've had rain.
Lake
County has And parts of Lake County have had rain, but
Well,
not all of it.
Did you get any rain in the second bout?
Yeah. The one a couple days ago, I got like a half an inch.
Okay, and I got less. I really only got about 4/10 of an inch in the second one. So you got more than I did for that one.
Well,
but
that's payback for the rain barrel.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure I want any more after the rain barrel incident. But Open Lands was talking about, in particular, newly planted trees. They got to be watered once a week for at least the first 3 years. From bud break in the spring to the first frost in November. I think people forget that. They think after the first year, yeah, the tree's on its own now. No, a newly planted tree is a newly planted tree for about 3 years. And arborists look at it that way. Tree keepers look at it that way. That's how they're taught, is that if you have a newly planted tree, think of it as newly planted for 3 years. So keep the water going.
And the plant health care report was saying in this type of a condition, even very mature trees are needing the water. It's not just the newly planted.
Right,
trees.
and that's the other thing. Right, mature trees as well. Don't assume that just because a tree's been around forever, it can get by during a severe drought. Yeah, a moderate drought, some trees will. But was it skeet showing me some damage to trees? But I also saw a thing in the Arboretum
the plant health care report.
Yeah, chlorosis, which can be a soil issue, but it can also be a dryness issue. So
My milkweeds have that right now.
yeah, you said you've got chlorotic milkweed, which is really weird. Mine's not chlorotic. I looked at it. It's a little floppy because I don't have.
And it's all very short. All the milkweed I'm seeing this year in the area is short.
Yeah. So just remember this. And in fact, why don't we talk to Rick DiMaio and see what's going to come up this week and maybe the end of the drought. So stick around. It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki, and we will be right back.
You can help slow climate change in 2021 by composting. And you don't even need a backyard. By composting communally in multi-unit buildings across Chicagoland, Collective Resource Compost has diverted 7,000 tons of food scrap since 2010. CRC brings you a fresh 5-gallon bucket or a 32-gallon neighbor tote with each pickup. You fill it with organic matter, they swap it out, and get it to a commercial composting operation. Fight climate change. Go to collectiveresource.us.
Whether you're a farmer or a backyard gardener, assist your soil in providing key nutrients to your plants with Spectrum Soil Inoculum from Tineo Biologicals. The beneficial microorganisms in Spectrum break down and release vital nutrients and make them more accessible to your plants. Spectrum works with nature to decompose organic matter into humus, building richer, healthier soil. Spectrum is approved for use on certified organic crops and is OMRI listed. Get Spectrum at blazing-star.com.
New water bottle.
Yeah, those paper cups can really add up. This is a simple way to help reduce trash and waste, and with Waste Reduction Week coming up.
Speaking of which, how do we tell Oscar there'll be less trash?
Did someone say there'll be less trash?
Yeah, we'll still give our trash to you.
There'll just be less.
Is that trash there for me?
Oh, no, this is my reusable water bottle. I can use it again and again.
Oh,
Sorry.
well, if it's not trash, then scrap!
Waste Reduction Week. Take action at WRWCanada.com.
Yeah, you can always count on the Muppets to have a good report. And guess what? Rick must think we're running late. Well, fooled him. So we'll just pop that off for the moment. And when I see him pop back in, we will get to him.
I will text him.
Nah, he knows. Or go ahead. Sure, why not? Say, hey, Rick. We're tap dancing here. One of the other stories that I think we have to cover at some point because it's so weird, and we've alluded to it recently, is what's going on the northwest side of Chicago, where the woman drove her car over a native garden because she didn't like the fact
politics.
Because he doesn't support the alderman, or the alder, I guess. Even now they're trying to figure out what to call themselves.
Critter.
I like Alder Critter myself, yeah. But yeah, that thing continues to go on. I've been following some of the Twitter handles regarding that, and it's a nutty situation. And there's some real bad blood going on in Alder Critter Gardner's ward. And so we might have to have Pizza's Nika on the show, because he's the guy who had the native garden that beat City Hall, that he didn't have to pay the fine, and now there he is.
It's been run over.
It's been run over in the middle of the night by a woman screaming like a banshee, and saying he doesn't support the alder critter. So what a weird situation. All right.
Sounds like we might have Rick.
I believe we do. Let's go to meteorologist. Hey there, dude. How are you?
Hi, Mike. Hi, Peg. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there.
Yeah, happy Father's Day to you. I mean,
thank you, and to the mothers who made them fathers.
Okay.
There you go.
And I was.
We're gonna have an audience of one.
I have no idea where that's going, and I'm not sure. So I was looking at radar this morning and seeing a big blob just about at the Mississippi River. Is that getting closer to Chicago?
Yeah, it is, but I think the leading edge is probably just going to produce some light to moderate rain. The activity that is on the front edge of this, quote, mesoscale convective vortex actually started out in parts of eastern Colorado and southeast Wyoming last night, and it's been able to hold together as what we call a mesoscale convective system that has moved across Nebraska. It's moved across Iowa, moved across northern Missouri. All the areas that needed the rain got about 1.5 inches to 2.5 inches. But those areas in Nebraska and parts of Iowa pretty much need about 6 to 8 inches. So they only got about 25% of what they need. The good thing is that we're heading into a cloudier, cooler pattern. So any rain that did fall most likely will be able to soak down into the soil and not evaporate, which is what happened last week when we had nearly 4 inches of rain evaporate from the soil due to the fact that we were so warm. That leading edge of the rain most likely will get here probably by about 1 or 2 o'clock, just in the form of light rain showers. And then the developing area of low pressure out across pretty much like the Dakotas down into Minnesota will form a fairly strong cold front, one that we haven't seen around here in quite some time of that vigor. And if there's enough low-level return flow into the front, that should promote squall line, and probably what's called a quasi-linear convective system means that you'll have like some wiggles along it, meaning that if there's enough movement of the squall line, that could produce some downward motion, which means severe weather and some large hail. But right now, I don't know if that's going to happen. Usually when you get thunderstorms of this variety in the morning, it kind of keeps the atmosphere a little bit on the stable side. Nonetheless, even if we don't get severe weather, there's enough moisture in the atmosphere where the second bout of rain could produce 1.5 inches to 2 inches of rain. Now, if those areas in Iowa that got the 1 to 2 inches of rain get an additional 1.5 to 2 inches of rain, they will have gotten nearly 50% of the rain that they need, which again is really, really good, because Iowa, which is the number one state from a standpoint of producing corn, number 2 from soybeans. Illinois is number 2 in corn and number 1 in soybeans. That's really, really needed, because over the next 2 weeks is the most crucial stage for corn and soybeans, because they begin pollinating in the first week of July. So this is really, really well needed, needed rain, welcomed rain. And the commodity markets, the Board of Trade in Chicago on Friday, the markets reflected that when they were way up on Wednesday and Thursday, and when the forecast came out for rain this weekend and the next 8 to 14 days being cooler, they dropped back down again, because there's a huge demand from China for soybeans from the United States. So the fact that our weather is not only important for us here, it's also important globally as well.
Yeah, I want to show you. Let me find this here. Here it is. this is something you sent the other day, and this is Iowa. And looking at the rain deficits there, it's pretty spectacular in some places.
Yeah, and what's really amazing, Mike and Peg, is, when you watch Chicago TV, we focus on, Midway and O'Hare and the lakefront, and we put every once in a while you'll see, a meteorologist put some really cool graphics up. But when you get out into, places like Des Moines and places like, even the Quad Cities or maybe Sioux City, you see their meteorologists really get into the important stuff. And I grabbed this from one of the stations out of Des Moines, and they must have went through probably 2 minutes of ag weather. Now, granted, Chicago is Chicago. Des Moines is much different because Iowa, I think 90% of the state is farmland, but 75% of the state of Illinois is farmland. And I think oftentimes the TV weather people here kind of tend to forget about that. You can kind of broaden your scientific horizons and talk more about the rest of the state. But when I was looking at the weathercaster presenting this, I was blown away by how much detail she got into. She showed not only the map, which is the most current map from Thursday, because you can see how the extreme drought is over northeast Illinois.
Yeah.
Look how much of Iowa is underneath, severe drought, which is that kind of dark brown. And not only that, they don't post how much rain fell, but they post how much rain is almost kind of like what's needed. And this really kind of shows you what I'd like to see also is you could actually put on here kind of like if you just got normal rainfall, where you would be, say, by the end of August, you would still be down probably about 4 inches. And the difficulty now is you need to be in a surplus rainfall pattern, and we're not in that. So the chances of this drought remaining significant in parts of Iowa, even though we'll get some decent rains, is pretty likely. Here in northeast Illinois, again, you have like maybe, I think there's a map I sent you as well, which shows just the state of Illinois. We got some decent rains last Sunday. I think, Peg, you got, what, was it about half? Is that what you said in Highland Park?
No, that was during the week. Last Sunday was nothing.
And I don't have I didn't load up just the Illinois, but you can see it from here.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's the Midwest drought.
Right, but I think, Peg, you had like about 1.5 inches Thursday night into Friday, correct?
Half an inch.
Only half an inch, okay. So it was basically like northern sections of Lake County that got about 1.5 inches. But again, what it shows you here is that area of Iowa and northwest Illinois is probably the most significant. The red area over northeast Illinois, really the only county that's being affected by that is probably just McHenry County. Much of Lake County, there's not really a whole heck of a lot of large areas of farming. But even northern DeKalb County got some decent rain. So I would not be surprised if by the time we get to next Thursday's map, that red is almost most likely eradicated, and the severe drought is probably shrunk as well. But in the places really where it's needed, Minnesota is actually the third most prevalent state in the U.S. for corn. Most people wouldn't think that. Yeah, but that area, if you've ever driven along 94 from Madison through La Crosse across southern Minnesota, it's all corn. Yeah. It's amazing how much of that southern area of Minnesota is farmland. But most people go, Minnesota, it's cold up there. No, there's a lot of parts of Minnesota. It's just like Iowa. It's corn, it's flat, and they're in a drought.
Yeah, Green Giant around the Twin Cities. It's pretty big.
Yeah. I mean, what is it? I think Hormel is there, and then there's another large manufacturing plant. Now, this one, I like this map a lot.
Yeah, I like this too. Yeah.
This is 180 days. This goes back basically 6 months. And Mike and Peg, this is what we were talking about. I mean, this show was talking about this back in January and February and March. And we kept saying, even though we're green right now, this is all young vegetation, and all you need is a week of dry weather and hot weather, and all that green just goes crump like that. So this really shows you where these things, where this started. But one thing I don't understand, Mike, is I don't understand why municipalities still have to send out their workers and cut grass in public areas down to this when we're in the middle of a drought? Why do they do that? Is there any way that you can kind of go there and say it's not a good idea to cut the grass down to here where we're in the middle of drought? I mean, is there anything you could do about that?
I sure wish there were, because and a lot of companies do that too, not just municipalities, but private companies, because they're on a schedule. It doesn't, because you'll see them out in the rain, and they're cutting grass in the rain. If unless, and the idea, it's not about the grass, it's about the schedule, and that's the problem. Is that when you're dealing with growing things, you have to pay attention to what is growing and how it's growing. But companies have a bottom line, and they're sending people out on the schedule because that's what they consider important.
But I don't think realize that when you're cutting grass down to an inch height during a drought, it doesn't do well for the soil. It doesn't do well for the soil to now be more exposed to sun and dry. I don't understand it.
It just kills the grass, is what it does. I mean, it's creating.
But there's an educational gap here.
Well,
of expectation.
Yeah, well, there's an educational gap, and there's again, it's the way bureaucracies are set up, and what do you do with those guys if you don't send them out to cut the grass? And there should be something you could do, and but it doesn't make any sense to do that, because now you've added costs, because you're going to have to do something with the grass that no longer exists. You're going to have to reseed. You're going to have to regrow it. So it costs you money when you do that.
Maybe the idea is to mow the hell out of it during a drought, so that in another month, when we're in a really, really, really bad situation, there's no grass to mow. And then instead of just mowing grass, they're like literally with those weed whackers throwing dust and dirt everywhere. I mean, I don't get it at all.
Yeah, and here's another map you sent that I thought was pretty interesting. This is the 7-day period ending 2 days ago, where we had some rain, and you can see Wisconsin did okay, and we even did not too bad in the Chicago area. So if we keep chipping away at that, we might break some of this drought.
What about out west, though? Oh, sorry.
We will get to that.
Fine, Peg. Well, no, Peg, you're talking about the Western U.S. or Western Illinois?
Yeah, no, Western U.S.
Oh, okay. That's coming up. Well, you want to look at that? We can look at that right now too. So there it is. Go back to this one. Okay. All right.
Yeah, let's go back. So it's important to note this yellow here. The rain that came down on Thursday night into Friday, 1.5 inches. No. That was last Saturday, 1.5 inches at O'Hare. The one that came down on Thursday and Friday was part of this second complex, but that yellow actually was 2.49 inches at Elk Grove Village, and it was a pretty decent rain that kind of fell across western Cook County, which is why the map that was issued Thursday morning didn't have this new rainfall on it. Okay, so if people looking at the map that showed all of that red, that map had information up until Wednesday. 24 hours later, all this fell, which is why all of that area now most likely will go back to probably just severe drought as opposed to extreme drought.
Yeah, this is the map you're talking about. So a lot of this won't be there, especially where the dark red is in some of the brown area.
Right. Now, if you go to the 7-day rainfall, what's also good is that this fell in the Wisconsin River watershed. So a lot of this will also flow down into some of these tributaries, which will probably help some of the farmers in northeast Iowa if they have to grab some of that water from the Wisconsin River and the Mississippi to help with irrigation, because most likely they are irrigating out in this area. Also, this part of western Iowa that had about 2.5 to 3 inches after the drought, they got another 1 to 2 inches on top of that. So this is really good news for all of central Iowa. Also, in addition to that, rain fell also in areas of parts of southwest lower Michigan. Now, this area here in southern Illinois, they don't need the rain. In fact, the last 2 nights, I think the St. Louis area has had nearly a half a foot of rain. So it's been really, really wet across central areas of Missouri, into Illinois, parts of Indiana, and also into Ohio. But the bottom line is the number 1 and number 2 states from a standpoint of corn and soybeans, Iowa and Illinois, 50% of them are in severe drought. And that's one of the reasons why the markets are reacting that way. Now, if you want to go to the West, we can talk about that.
No, look, before we do that, but let's look at the 7-day precipitation to come that is being forecast, which is pretty good news for parts of Illinois and Iowa.
Oh, yeah. And this actually started yesterday morning. So this will include the rain that's coming through this afternoon and tomorrow. And then there's another batch that looks like it may come through Thursday night into Friday. But we're definitely in more of a trend where we'll see some of these, not so much thunderstorm type events, but more of a cold front type event where you get more widespread kind of lighter totals, but over a larger area. And that's what's really needed right now. You just get these pop-up areas of thunderstorms. It doesn't really help too much. I mean, there's some areas where farmers have, 5,000 acres, and they know that one side of their farm could get like 1.5 inches, the other side might get a 1/2 inch. Like what Peg got, a 1/2 inch where, western areas of Cook County, granted that's not a farm, but it kind of alludes to that point. Also, this area here, they've been doused with very, very heavy rain over the last couple of days. So this area, I think, is going to do pretty well. But again, it's that northern part of Iowa and also northwest Illinois that's really in dire straits right now. You can go to the next map.
But I wanted to show this one too. This is more about the previous map. It relates to that, the 6 to 10 day precipitation probability. So it's looking better for this part of the country.
Yeah, this one, and then even the 8 to 14 day looks pretty good. And again, it's also important to note that it's not so much precipitation, but it's also evaporation. So that first 4 inches of soil, that's where a lot of the plants are getting rooted right now. That's where they really need to help. Once they get those roots down below 4 inches, then they'll rely on what's called subsoil. So you have topsoil, then you have subsoil. And it's amazing. You look at some of those crop reports that I send, they really go into depth between topsoil moisture, subsoil moisture, because then at that point they know that all that's coming back up to the plants. Then they get into the pollination stage. Then you could really get the plant rooted. But right now the farmers are just basically trying to make sure what they planted can get rooted so that when rains do come, they're able to tap into that subsoil moisture. So yeah, the science of agriculture and meteorology are really interrelated quite a bit. So this is temperature. This is the 8 to 14 day, and you can see that cooler area over the southern Ohio Valley. By the way, right where that earthquake was last week, by the way.
Yeah.
But you notice more than anything is this just large region of just hot weather that is now actually shifting northward. So now it's moving up into Northern California, Northwest Nevada, where no one lives, but also parts of Oregon as well. And it's interesting to note, this sometimes doesn't make the news, but I was looking at both Phoenix and Tucson, and Phoenix actually set a record that isn't really, quote, a weather record, but it's a climate record. They hit their 5th consecutive day of 115 degrees or higher. 5th consecutive day of 115 degrees or higher. They've never done that before. Matter of fact, the record that they broke, Mike and Peg, was the one that they set last year, was when they hit 115 degrees 4 days in a row. And they did that twice last year. So one of the things that we like to talk about with not so much climate change, but climate variability, is there's different ways of expressing not only extremes, but what we call trends of extremes or trends of averages. So when you get 115 days, when you get 115 degrees 5 days in a row, and these records go back to 1895. Now, granted, people go, but 1895, before that, what were the records? That doesn't matter because Phoenix didn't literally exist before 1895 from a standpoint of being an urban heat island. Not only did Phoenix do that, but Tucson was 110 degrees for the 8th consecutive day. During that trend, or during that period, I think they had 4 records set. But what you do is if you would go in there and look at the average number of degrees over that period of time, we've never seen that before. Even Vegas, 4 days in a row of over 110, and I think there were a couple of days where they've hit, like 117. But one of the things that's interesting is you look at these overnight low temperatures. Everybody is setting these record. What I'm trying to think of how to say it, these record high minimums, where like the overnight low didn't get below 90 degrees. And one of the reasons why that's happening in some of these urban centers like Vegas, like Phoenix, and like Tucson is what are people running constantly during the overnight period? They're air conditioners. What do air conditioners produce on the outside at night? Like a big air conditioner unit?
Heat.
It produces heat. So one of the things that we're seeing is that these areas where you're getting just phenomenal amounts of heat during the day and you're super hot, just super warm at night, people are like saying, I need to stay cool at night. So in fact, what we're seeing here is not only it being super hot at night or super hot at day, but incredibly warm at night due to the fact that all of these air conditioning units are running.
And as you can see, the drought just continues pretty much unabated in the West. Although it was interesting, we talked to Kathleen's sister just the other day, and she's in San Diego, and they were dealing, like the U.S. Open was, with the marine layer coming in, cool and moist, though not raining. So if you're right there on the coast, it's a different story.
Right. And one of the things they do, I think you've heard this before, they call it May gray and also June gloom. That usually occurs when you get really hot inland, and what's called the thermal low, it literally pulls the marine layer in, but because it's such a shallow layer, the moisture is being condensed as it moves over the mountains. That's one of the reasons why you get fog. Now, I have to point out something too. I don't know if you guys watch Bill Maher Friday night. Did any of you watch it?
No.
On of HBO,
Okay.
nope.
Okay. He put up a map of the drought, and his map was old. But it wasn't even from this year. It was like from last year. So I'm watching it with Rebecca. I jumped off the couch. I'm like, what is this? This is not even a current map. So I spent probably about a half hour, and I finally found the email to his executive producer, and I sent the current map of the drought and a current map, and I'll send it to you, the current map of the drought, and then a link. And I'm like, dude, if you got to talk about climate change, which you do all the time, use current data. I mean, I don't know how that map got on, because it actually had drought through parts of northern Illinois. I mean, central Illinois. So I don't know where he got it from. So whether or not I'm going to get a response come from him saying, F you and the horse you rode in on, or thanks so much for this. This is great. We'd like to have you on the show. I don't know. Yeah. But the bottom line is, if you're going to use a map that shows drought, make sure it's current. I mean, come on. But yeah, I was really disappointed.
So last week you're writing to the New York Times and saying, "Hey, dude, you're not getting it right," and this week you're writing to Bill Maher. So you'll end up famous for whatever reason. By the way,
I'm getting both posts, right?
Yeah. Regarding our conversation about mowing lawns, Audrey wrote to us, said, neighbors complain loudly when the grass is not cut in their neighborhood parks. Here's the problem, Audrey. When there's no rain, the grass doesn't grow. It's thin, like your hair is disappearing, it's not growing, and there's no reason to cut it.
You don't get more haircuts, right? You let it grow out. What we want to do is we want all of our public lawns to have a comb over. How about that?
Okay, we'll figure out how to do that.
Okay, well, the grass from one side to the other side, right?
Yeah. So while we're getting a little bit of relief in the Midwest, I assume that none of that in sight for the west part of the country.
Oh God, no.
Okay.
In fact, Mike, I also sent you a map. If you want to show that to your audience, it's a national map of rainfall needed, which is a great map, which really begins to show.
I don't remember seeing that one.
It was on there.
Well, okay, you sent me a lot of stuff, so I don't have that one available. But anyway, go ahead.
It's in the PDF, but nonetheless, if you want to share it with your audience, eventually, it shows you not only the area of drought, but the area that rain is needed. And what Bill Maher did a really good job of on Friday night, here I am criticizing Bill Maher, he talked about the need that California has for agriculture. Which crop in California do you think needs the most rain or the most water for irrigation? Almonds, yeah.
Almonds, yeah.
It's a phenomenal number, and it's like, why are we putting so much water into this crop when it needs to go elsewhere? So the bottom line is, and if you ever want to watch a really great movie about bringing water to the people, it's Chinatown.
Yeah.
Because everything about that movie was how they were diverting water from the orange grove areas, which California was known for back in the 20s and 30s, into the areas where people needed it. So it was really interesting. So I wonder if we're going to get into one of these, quote, water wars by the time we get to, maybe the end of July or August, because it is really, really bad out there.
Yeah.
And
you look at the lake levels, they're just, and the Colorado River barely exists at this point. And they're talking about instituting laws that have been on the books a long time, but they've never had to go to.
Right. Peg, you were going to say something.
I was going to say in Colorado, Mike had posted that article earlier in the week about how they're going after ponds on ranches.
Right. Oh, yeah. Out there, water is like oil. It really is. But one last thing, and I hate making predictions like this, but this is when it's going to start to become a war in California, is when you start to have massive wildfires and you have people's homes and you have vineyards and you have horse ranches literally on the edge of the flames, and the firemen have no water going through their hoses. That's when it's going to become an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
when you start to see water being used for golf courses, I mean, Torrey Pines is green. Why? Because it's all being watered. But when you start to ration water for the sake of rich white men going out and hitting the golf ball, there's something wrong with that.
I think that's a good ending point. So give us a forecast.
All right. So this band of showers coming through will probably weaken, but we may have something coming through here between about 2 and 4, but the main front won't come through until about probably 8 or 9 o'clock tonight. So we'll have a decent band of rain. Hopefully it'll come through really slowly, and we'll get about an inch out of it. That's probably my guess is what we'll get. But that'll only be about 30% of where we need to be. So we're going to be about probably still 5 to 6 inches below what we need. After that, tomorrow, low to mid-70s or mid-70s with cloudy and cooler conditions. And then Tuesday and Wednesday, just beautiful, mid-June weather. And I know it, like astronomically, summer starts tomorrow, but who cares about that when I really think about it? And then it looks like we'll get into another little pocket of warm advection rain probably by Thursday and into Friday. But we're definitely into a pattern over the next 2 weeks that no heat, no huge amounts of evaporation. So any rain that we do get will probably stick around in the soil for a fairly long time.
You were talking about an inch of rain for tonight. Is that going to be widespread?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I would say 90% of the area is going to get an inch of rain. So this will probably be the most beneficial rain around here in about a month.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Okay. All right, Rick. Yeah, have a great week. We'll talk to you next Sunday.
Mañana.
Or whatever for next week. And I think that just about does it here now. If I can find, is this what I'm looking for? Yeah, this guy. Okay, let's do this. Woo! Okay, thanks to everybody on the show, to Craig LeHoullier. I wanted to say that, and I never did. LeHoullier. And Keith Mueller, a.k.a. Casey Tomato. Thanks to meteorologist Rick DiMaio. Thanks to Kathleen. Thanks to Lagata and Basil. And no thanks to Comcast. So, no. But thanks to everybody watching the show and sticking with us. We appreciate it. Until next time, go green or
go home.
Stadler?
What?
Is that it?
Yes, it's over. How'd you like it?
I don't know. I slept through the whole thing.
Well, you didn't miss much.